Welcome everyone to today's Holistic Spirituality program with our guest speaker, Dhira Govinda Prabhu, also to many known as David Wolf. The topic today is through conscious communication to enlightenment. Before we enter the contents, I would say a few also technical details perhaps to Zoom. Many of you are likely very familiar with that, and most of you have the camera off, so there's in a way no need to say, in case you don't want to be visible on camera, you can switch it off. Also on the stream it's supposed to be like that mainly actually Dhira Govinda Prabhu and myself will be visible, so it will be a public session. It will also be available public then on Facebook and also on YouTube. So in case you don't feel comfortable to be publicly available, so to speak, you can also enter later your comments or questions in regards to the session in the chat, and we will read the questions. Same for those who might join us on Facebook. Please leave your comments and questions in the comment section. So I'm glad to have David or Dhira Govinda Prabhu with us today. David is the founder of the Sattva Institute School of Transformative Coaching. I met Dhira Govinda or David in 2005 first, I guess. It was the Sattva seminars in Switzerland where I participated. It was a very powerful seminar which had a deep impact on my personal life in terms of transformation and like giving your life a direction and learning so many things about communication and conscious living. And later also I did the coach training, or like the first part of the coach training with David in the Sattva Institute, which accompanies me till today in a very profound way in my career. I work as a therapist and a coach, also a hypnotherapist, and all the skills and paradigms and all the experiences, they formed me a big deal, and I'm very grateful for those experiences. And also I'm grateful and glad that David or Dhira Govinda Prabhu is with us today. He also published a book long ago which is called Relationships That Work, The Power of Conscious Living, and also a new book, The Power of Bhakti. It was like maybe 1 or 2 years ago, or like when it was, yes,
2019, Power of Bhakti.
Yes. In connection to the book Relationships That Work, David also contributed something very important to the spiritual and scientific community, since he made a scientific study on the effects of Maha Mantra chanting on depression, stress depression, and the three gunas, which is a concept we might hear today more of, and also like a Vedic personality inventory, like a whole kind of test, or like a way to assess yourself in terms of your personality type in regards to the Bhagavad Gita. So I would like to open up with a general question to David. First of all, the format is supposed to be like this. David and myself, we will have like some question and answer session going on, and in due course of the session we will also open up for questions and comments from the audience. So like, please feel free again to, if you don't want to participate by a video or audio, to put your questions or comments in the chat. Otherwise, you can also, how to say, come up with a video. All right, David, in your seminars, when you teach transformative communication and personal transformation, we also hear like that you teach like that we co-create our lives by the way we communicate with ourselves and others. And could you tell us a bit about what does that mean? How like is communication connected to creating or co-creating the life we live, or like by communicating with ourselves and others in a certain way?
Okay, thanks for inviting me, Keshava. And I'll say I appreciate what I understood of the question from Jacob. And I sense we will discuss that, the question. Yeah, sometimes, you know, we emphasize the spiritual principle. Things go from subtle to external. Things go from subtle to external. And so, yeah. So in a sense, creation always happens twice. First on the subtle platform with an idea, and then in the external realm. And so, you know, subtle, like thoughts lead to feelings, leads to willing, leads to actions. Our actions form our character. Actions lead to habits, lead to character. Our character determines our destiny. So just like, okay, we're always, it is said, the quality of our communication is the quality of our life. So communication with others, communication's happening in every sphere, whether our work life, our service life, our family, social life. And so also we're always communicating with ourselves. So things go from subtle to external. So if I'm communicating with myself, I'm not lovable, then I will attract, that will show up in the world. She rejected me. He doesn't like me. If I'm communicating with myself, I'm not trustworthy, I'm not dependable, then I'll attract that in the world, in co-creation with super soul, higher powers. Oh, I let him down again. I didn't keep my agreement. If I'm communicating with myself, I deserve abundance and love to flow in my life, then that will show up. So, so starting with our communication with ourselves, that's going to determine our reality. It's basic spiritual principle. Things go from subtle to external. Actually, just in contemplation on the previous discussion, I'm thinking like, yeah, something that comes to me is like, if so let's say if I want to buy gold, if I want to purchase gold. So to purchase gold, well, in a sense, I need two things. I'm reminded of Krishna's statement in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Sham satata yuktanam bhajatam pridipurvagam tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamu piyantite. Two things, sincerity and intelligence. Now, I don't need that much intelligence. So the main thing is sincerity. And that I really want to purchase gold. So now I need some intel, like, okay, so to purchase gold, it's not like I need a PhD in geology. I need to be an expert in mineralogy and chemistry. No, I don't need that, but I need to have enough intelligence. Like, let's say if I go, okay, here I've got $20,000 to purchase gold, so I'll go to the car mechanic shop. Here's $20,000. Will you give me gold? Sure. Here's a wrench, you know, made of iron. I'm thinking it's gold. I can go to the men's clothing store. I need to have enough sincerity or enough intelligence to know where to go. Okay, here's an authorized, trustworthy seller of gold. Here's a shop. Here's a broker that is authorized and credible. It doesn't mean that I need to be like, I might have all sorts of misunderstandings about mineralogy or geology or rocks or different things, but I need to have sincerity and enough intelligence to know where to go. So I see it similar if I'm sincerely wanting self-realization, knowledge, and process to support me in self-realization and in how I can connect with the absolute in a spirit of devotion. So it's not necessarily that I need to be an expert in the science of self-realization. I need sincerity and I need enough intelligence to know where to go, where there's a source of unfiltered knowledge without cluttered mind. So I'll pause there.
All right, thank you. So you highlighted the aspect of sincerity as a main aspect of, like, let's say at the end where you said to find the true thing, if I use that term, you know. So it's about that. It's more like an attitude, an inner attitude, besides like how I choose to maybe communicate.
Yeah, well, how I choose to communicate, that's going to be determined. It's going to be determined by my attitude, by the by the modes of nature I choose to associate with. And so you mentioned about my Maha Mantra studies. I'll mention also in 2019, we printed the Maha Mantra dissertation in book form. And yeah, so we did scientific, according to the most rigorous methods of modern social science. We examined the effects of chanting mantra, genuine mantra, on things like life satisfaction, stress, depression. And the results strongly confirm and verify, I'll call it the Vedic hypothesis. The Vedic hypothesis. When I started my Vedic personality inventory studies, my intention was about establishing what I'll call an empirical basis for happiness, or an empirical basis for empowerment, for fulfillment, for security, for inner peace. All of those qualities, all of those experiences of self and life that pretty much everyone's searching for, right? In all of our doing, I want that position, that status, that bank account, that car. We're always seeking for an experience of security, value, importance, power. So the Vedas assert that there are three modes of material nature. You might say the mode of inertia, that's tamas, the mode of activity, that's rajas, and the mode of enlightenment, that's sattva. Like English words like saint or satisfied come from the Sanskrit sattva. The name of our institute, Sattva Tov Institute, School of Transformative Coaching. So we have the sattva from the ancient Sanskrit, and then tov from the biblical Hebrew, which means like the same as sattva, goodness. So goodness or enlightenment. So the Vedas assert that it's a whole science, psychological science. It's a whole science, that to the extent that our habits and our worldview is towards sattva, then there's going to be a direct positive correlation with all those qualities we're seeking: an experience of peace, happiness, fulfillment, security, satisfaction, compassion, empathy, like that. So that's the assertion. And we tested that with the Vedic personality inventory and the Maha Mantra studies, that to the extent that people cultivate sattvic habits in all areas of life, whether it's eating, sleeping, money management, communication, listening, not listening, to the extent we cultivate sattvic habits and sattvic worldviews, attitudes, then we're going to be happier, more joyful, more satisfied. So 3 modes of nature, but really there's a fourth. And the fourth is called Shuddha Sattva, which means pure goodness. And Shuddha Sattva, it's not just material sattva without the passion and ignorance, without the rajas and tamas, without the inertia and like that. Shuddha Sattva, it's actually a qualitatively different entity altogether. It's a qualitatively different entity altogether. And just as material sattva reveals what was covered, because it was covered by material mental disturbance, material greed, lust, envy, self-deception. So similarly, Shuddha Sattva reveals that which is naturally existing in the heart. Nityasiddha Krishna Prema Sajika Bunoi, Shravanadi Shuddhachite Karye Udai. That this natural bliss, this natural love of the Supreme Person, it's there in the heart, and through a process of Shuddha Sattva, it gets revealed. So, according to Vedic science, Vedic assertion, genuine mantra, it's not made just of sattva, it's actually made of Shuddha Sattva. And okay, and then there are particular assertions about when we expose ourselves to Shuddha Sattva vibration. When we expose ourselves to Shuddha Sattva vibration, what's the effects going to be? So, in what Shuddha Sattva means transcendental to the material. At the same time, the effects can be studied by what we call material science. And this is basically just like, okay, so like, let's say if we're in a room with a particular type of music, let's say we're in a room with hardcore punk rock for an hour. So we know it's going to affect our consciousness in a particular way. Let's say we're in a room with Mozart playing for an hour. It's going to affect our consciousness, our attitude in a different way, because it's different sound vibration in different modes. And so this, well, the term mantra has become pretty well known, as has the term yoga, meditation. So yoga, actually, it's an ancient Sanskrit term that means to link, to connect, to add to. Like the English word yog comes from the Sanskrit yoga, to connect. In its essential form, in its essential meaning, yoga means the self turning towards itself in self-awareness, and the self turning towards the absolute in a spirit of devotion. So anything we do that supports the self to turn towards itself in self-discovery, and the self to turn towards the Supreme in a spirit of devotion, that's yoga. If someone is doing agriculture, working in the fields, and they're coming closer to self-realization and closer to the ultimate, that would be called karma yoga. So mantra, actually there's a term I first heard used by Simon Crowell, also known as Krishna Bhajan. And he used the term, he's Swiss, he used the term the yoga of communication. So that's what we emphasize in the Safatov environment. And that's what mantra yoga is. It's the yoga of sound vibration. And that, you might say, that gets to the essence of how we can measure or differentiate between material sound vibration and spiritual sound vibration. Is exposure to this, is this sound vibration inspiring me to deeper enthusiasm for self-realization and devotional service to the Supreme? Or is this sound vibration alienating me from myself more and more? If it's the alienating type, then the way I relate to it is material. And if it's really inspiring me towards self-realization and devotion to the Supreme Person, then it's spiritual. So we did our studies on the effects, because there's many authentic mantras in ancient traditions, including the Vedas. Every authentic spiritual tradition has mantra. They might not call it that, like in the Old Testament from the Hebrew. There's a mantra: V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'kol levavka, b'kol nafshka, b'kol modecha. It's a very bhakti mantra. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might. And so we tested. we tested the Vedic assertions in regards to what's called the Maha Mantra. It's described in the ancient Upanishads, Idi Shodashakam Nam Nam Kalikamasa Nashanam, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That in this particular age, a process of self-realization that's most recommended, it's the chanting and hearing of what's called the Maha Mantra, which I just chanted. And we found, we did rigorous 3-group study. We had a placebo mantra chanting group. We had a Maha Mantra chanting group and a control group. And the Maha Mantra chanting group with strong statistical significance reduce their stress and depression and enhance their life satisfaction and other desirable experiences significantly more than both the placebo and the control group. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for this elaboration, David. So quite a few things were in your response. Something you said was like, by the association with the gunas, particular consciousness develops, which influences the way, let's say, how we vibrate when we communicate. The sounds that we take in also lead to a certain way how sounds come out from us, so to speak. And you spoke of the yoga of communication and how there is besides the 3 gunas, the 4th, Shuddha Sattva, which is a different type of sound vibration. And you made a distinction that how to recognize or like how to distinguish a spiritual sound vibration from a so-called material sound vibration. And you said the marker would be, or one marker would be, does this inspire me, or like how to say, pull me toward self-realization, or like activities and into spiritual development, or does it rather lead me away from that?
Yeah.
Because one of the questions also we say with the Gaudiya Vaishnavas or Vedic followers, they claim, yes, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, for example, they say transcendental sound vibration. And one might wonder, yeah, how is that so? If a transcendental sound vibration would be something, how to say, aloof to, or something very different from a material sound vibration, how can it be even recognized by a material ear? Everything we vibrate comes from so-called material senses. And like, for example, the word Rama from the Krishna mantra is in other words included, like the panorama. Someone sees the Swiss mountains, sees all the beautiful panorama. And it would not be necessarily considered this person is connecting with the Supreme and chanting. And the syllable itself might be considered to be a part of the so-called material sound vibrations. And could you again address that topic of distinguishing transcendental sound from so-called material sound? What would be the how to say, yeah, well, how can we distinguish that?
Okay, I appreciate your question, and I don't claim to have much realization, but I'll share some things that that I've understood, from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami's teachings. Okay, so related, so genuine mantra, genuine transcendental sound. That it's made of Shuddha Sattva. It's made of Shuddha Sattva, and it's a self-revealing vibration. So to the extent that we have devotion in approaching transcendental sound, then transcendental sound chooses to reveal to us. So it's not something that like I demand for transcendental sound to be revealed to me. It's a devotional process. And yes, okay, we can look quickly at epistemology, how we can know, just like, sure, to know, let's say if I want to study a rock, then maybe, what would be called the means to know an object, we need a suitable means to know. And so just like if I want to measure temperature and I have a radio, it's not going to help. It's not the right object. So if I want to measure a rock, if I want to understand a rock, because the rock, it's inferior to the researcher, inferior in the sense of it doesn't have consciousness, doesn't have desires. So we could use means like in what in the Vedas is called anumana, or modern empirical science. Take it into the laboratory, expose it to temperature, see how it reacts, and we can study it. Now, if we want to know, let's say, something of equal consciousness to us, like if I want to know you or anyone here, if we want to know each other, as far as the method of modern logical empiricism, I'll analyze you. Come into my laboratory. It's very limited. It's very limited. Maybe I can know something like, oh, he seems to like blue. Okay, something I can. But if I really want to know you deeply, that's not the process. The process is I gain your love and trust. I gain your love and trust by my service qualities. And then you choose to reveal yourself to me more and more deeply. So that's the epistemology of transcendental sound vibration. And so that's why if we sincere, does it make sense that the absolute would be more like a rock or more like a conscious entity? To me, it makes sense. The absolute would be a conscious personal entity with greater intelligence than you or I. So does it make more sense to try to understand the absolute through come into my laboratory and I'll study you, or through a process of devotion, and then the Supreme Person reveals themselves to us?
Yes.
So yes, go on.
Yes, I would like to enter here with a very important aspect of this culture, like or devotional culture that you just mentioned beautifully. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that for getting to know him, one should approach the representative, the Judas, like the sadhu, the guru, the person who's in knowledge, those who like the tattvadarshi, this is a Sanskrit term, who sees the truth. And the process described as inquiring submissively. And also in many of the Vedic scriptures, this process is very much emphasized and put forward, that this is the way to get to know that Supreme Person that can reveal itself to us. And could you speak a bit about the process of inquiry in terms of, inquiring in terms of questions, like there's a particular way how a question can be powerful and productive. There can be ways how questions are not at all productive. And in general, communication strategies, like how to inquire effectively in order to get the result of revelation at the end.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, just like, well, if we look at that epic treatise, the Bhagavad Gita, it's driven by Arjuna's questions, right? So this whole process, the bhakti process, the Vedic process, it very much discourages blind following. And it also discourages closed-minded cynicism, okay? So Arjuna wasn't just like, yeah, okay, yeah. No, he was saying, okay, now I'm hearing Krishna, you say this, and here you said this. I'd like to understand more how to connect the dots. How do I apply that practically? It seems impractical. So the whole philosophical treatise of Bhagavad Gita is driven by Arjuna's questions. So he's not like he's not in a callous, closed-minded cynicism. Neither is he blind following. So there's that healthy doubt, and that he's sincere to clear. So again, sincerity and intelligence. And so even if we just take it, let's say even if we want to learn physics, if we want to learn physics, okay. So to learn physics, I don't need to be an expert in physics to learn anything about physics, but I need some sincerity. I need enough intelligence to go, oh, okay, here's an authorized degree program. Oh, here's a professor who's published 40 articles on the topic, and he's giving me a book by these authors. Okay, and then I go in, and so the process, I don't just like, I don't just like foolishly nod my head when I don't understand something. No, I'm sincere and I trust. And when I'm not making sense of it, I'm not like, I demand that you explain. You're an idiot. You don't know anything. This doesn't make any sense. Explain it to me. The physics professor is not going to be real inspired. At the same time, it's kind of like, yes, well, on page 42, it said this, and you're saying this, and I'm not understanding the connection. I'd like to understand. Then the physics professor is naturally, oh, yes, that's a very intelligent question. I'm glad to share like that. So in any field, humble inquiry, and that's certainly true in the science of self-realization, the science of the self connecting with the divine in its original consciousness and in a spirit of devotion, that we find someone who's a master. Oh, he's a master in physics. He's a master in tennis. Okay, like she's a master in guitar. So let's learn. So we find a master. We find a master, and we inquire. And in that humble spirit, then naturally that exchange of transcendental knowledge takes place, and that is completely transformational for the soul.
Yeah, thank you. And could you also switch to the other side? Like now we had been seen looking at things from the side of the inquirer, and let's say the side of the master, or let's say master could be maybe on certain levels. We say gurus could be on different levels of realization, but in the role of the, let's say, instructing person, or like the person gives knowledge, what would you say? What is important there to look at how to properly, so to say, communicate the teachings so that the disciple, or like the inquirer, has the most benefit, or like the most benefit from?
Okay, thanks for your question. Thanks for your question. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, you just asked me a question. So you're putting me you're putting me in the role of responder.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, so what's happening for me? All right. So in Bhagavad Gita, in terms of modern communication process, we talk about terms like assertive communication as opposed to passive or aggressive. So assertive communication means communication that's in the mode of goodness, maybe Shuddha Sattva, but at least goodness. And so Bhagavad Gita, actually the original, we have a course, which I know you took and completed like a decade ago. And the original name of the course was Bhagavad Gita, the source of transformative communication. So that all these principles in Sattva Institute, our coaching, our coach training, our seminars, they're all coming from Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the teachings of Bhaktivedanta Swami. And so in terms of communication, it describes communication in lower modes, and then communication, sharing in Sattva, it describes a few elements. One, that our communication is truthful. Okay, so that we don't have some agenda to do a deception, or we're not just like let's say if we're on the road and we want to find directions to somewhere, and we ask someone, we hope they're going to be truthful. We hope they're not going to mislead us. So it's our responsibility and our vibration that we're not speaking nonsense. Shruti smriti purnari panchracha vidimvira aikantiki harir bhakti utpataya kalpate. That it's truthful, and it's based in absolute truth, right? Because there's relative truth and absolute. Like I can say, I'm David Wolf from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm 60 years old. Now that's relative truth. Was I David Wolf from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 100,000 years ago? Will I be David Wolf from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 1,000,000 years from now? And even those time frames, 1,000,000, hundreds of millions of years, that's not even it's not even an eye blink compared to the eternal life of the soul. So absolute truth is, I'm not this body, I'm spirit, soul, and I'm an eternal servant of the Supreme Person. That's true in all time and space. I remember once, it was in 2014, I was invited to Colorado, a town called Golden, Colorado. And I was asked to give a presentation to the faculty, the staff of a hospital. So most there, they were medical professionals, nurses, doctors, some psychiatrists, some social workers. And I started my presentation and I said, supposing someone comes to you and says, I've hurt my finger. Now, in that simple phrase, my finger, there are two entities. There's the finger and there's the owner of the finger. My finger, two entities, the finger and the owner of the finger. So I asked the doctors, the nurses, I asked, who are you treating? Are you treating the finger or the owner of the finger? There was the director of the hospital there, and like he was sitting there, he looked kind of stunned. And then he said, well, David, that's kind of a simple question. But you know, we never really thought about it. And then I said, well, it's an important question because the finger essentially is made of the same stuff as the window shade or the cardboard box. It's dead matter. There's no healing potency in the finger. The healing potency is in that irreducible quanta of consciousness that is the owner of the finger. So this is absolute knowledge. This is absolute truth. So in responding to the question, it's important that it's truth consistent with absolute truth, truth that is supportive to realize absolute truth, to realize who we are as not the body, as spirit souls, that atomic unit of sentience that animates the body. And it's important that to be effective in terms of supporting self-realization for everyone involved, because just like whether it's Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavad, that there's questions and responses, and in one sense it doesn't matter who's in which role. So in responding, Munaya Sarupishtoham Bhavad Birloka Mangalam Yat Krita Krishna Samprashno Yenat Masu Prasidati. That Sutta Goswami responding to the questions at Nami Sharanya from the sages headed by Saunaka Rishi. He says, I'm enlivened by your questions because they enhance self-realization and God consciousness. So whether we're in the role of inquirer or responder, we want the vibration to enhance deeper inspiration for self-realization and God consciousness. So true and beneficial, because sometimes in the name of truth, I can go, in your face, here's the truth. I'm just giving you honest feedback in your face. But I want to look at, okay, what I said true? And am I sincerely communicating it in a way that my intention is to be beneficial, supportive of conscious living, that I'm not intending to take out my unhealed wounds on this person in the name of honesty. Like, I don't want to withhold honesty. At the same time, in the name of honesty and truth, maybe influenced by rajas, am I taking out my unhealed wounds? Am I my need to feel superior? Am I coming from a top-down place in a disrespectful way? So true, beneficial, unoffensive, truly intending to co-create benefit, and all based on true knowledge. So in that way, whether I'm in the role of responder or speaker, well, to quote Srila Rupa Goswami, a philosopher and fully realized bhakti yogi from hundreds of years ago, well, he used the phrase dadati pranikrinati guyam akyati prichati. So in that way, our communication, Rupa Goswami is describing exchanges of affection between persons sincere about and dedicated to self-realization. And he describes certain qualities and elements that are vital for such meaningful exchanges that support self-realization, true spiritual vibration. And Guyamakiti Prichati means we create an environment. We create an environment in relationship that is conducive to share the heart confidentially and to inquire confidentially. So whether we're inquiring or responding, to what extent is the quality and content of my vibration strengthening that environment where it's a safe place to share the heart confidentially and to inquire confidentially.
Thank you so much for those elaborations on these 3 items. Yeah, Krishna addresses as the austerity of speech in the Bhagavad Gita, and perhaps I'm going to share the slide where the verse is said. Just give me a second. I will. So we can see it here. So you mentioned the truthfulness, which was very nicely explained, and also the beneficial aspect, which I find also in a very good, powerful connection to truthful, like that, not for the sake of truth being unbeneficial. And then there's here not agitating to others and pleasing, this priya, satyam priya hitam jayat, and also regularly reciting Vedic literature. So Krishna describes these 5 items as consisting that they consist the austerity of speech. So as a guideline, how one should speak, or we spoke about the roles of those who question, those who respond, and so on. And many, including myself, find it to be challenging to apply all those 5 ideally effectively at the same time. It seems sometimes that they seem to even exclude each other. That I guess it depends, of course, on the conditioning of the person. For example, to be truthful and pleasing sometimes seems to be mutually exclusive. They don't have to be, of course, I don't say it's not possible, but it's often people experience it. Or not agitating, and then considering reciting Vedic literature, how is something to be supported philosophically and so on. So could you also share a bit with us, first of all, how these 5 things can, in your experience, ideally be connected in one, let's say, in a way of now we have a session where you speak, or maybe give a class, or you do a training, and you spoke about 3 items, and perhaps you would like to add the others and emphasize a bit how can they be all brought together, and yes, perhaps also describe why and how is this an austerity, although it might perhaps be a bit self-explanatory, but I still ask.
Thank you, Keshava. Yeah, I think you kind of responded to the austerity question. And you kind of responded because you said sometimes I'll be truthful, but then unpleasing, and Vedas, it's really difficult. Yeah, it's difficult. It's challenging, at least for conditioned souls. So for me, it's challenging. So Rishabhadev in the 5th canto Bhagavatam, he talks to his sons, headed by Bharat. Tapo divyam putrake nasatvam shudya jasmad brahmasakyam tvananta. So he describes human life is designed, it's meant for austerity. It means giving up some immediate comfort or gratification for some longer term, ultimate, eternal, enduring fulfillment. So whether it's some austerity and some reasonable austerity in eating, in sleeping, in rising early. I'd like to sleep till 9 a.m., but I'm going to get up at 4 a.m. because that'll support my spiritual life from enduring it. So also in speech, it's difficult because we're influenced by lower modes. We can look at the example of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Sometimes even at a first meeting, he would say like the heaviest things to people. But if, in reading his conversations, like, and they might not like it, but they wouldn't take offense at him. Somehow they got that he's coming there. He's really caring about them. He's coming from a pure place. So we don't want to imitate that. We don't want to imitate that. But austerity means like it takes practice, because it is sometimes said, if we're only willing to do what's easy, life will be hard. If we're ready to do what's hard, life will be easy. So let's apply that to the realm of communication. So let's say there's some situation and there's some deception going on, or violation of transgression of boundaries. Okay. And maybe in some cases, yes, I mean, some cases we maybe tolerate with silence, but some cases we know it's like, it's our service to speak up. But the path of least resistance is, oh, I just won't say anything. And then it's just like dark lower mode pervades and permeates everything. I just won't say anything. Not because I'm choosing silence, because I'm too scared to speak my truth, to speak my perceptions. So it's easier. And then I'm living with resentment, like, oh, he or she is repressing me still and oppressing me. And I'm feeling low self-esteem and shame because I'm too scared to speak my truth. Or it could also be relatively easy to just like, okay, I'm going to speak, blah, 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 and I'm going to fight back and blah. Okay. And maybe we're speaking, but we're not doing the real austerity of, okay, it is my service, it's my purpose, my role here to courageously communicate my truth, to communicate my perceptions, share honest feedback. And part of the austerity, and is to do it in a way where I'm really sincere, where I'm truly intending everyone to benefit and everyone to grow. Now, maybe they won't be pleased, we don't know. But I'm really wanting to be sincere. I get super soul inspiration, how to communicate myself boldly, courageously, and simultaneously, considerately, sensitively, empathically. And that's an austerity. It requires to not just give in to the rajas tendency, blah, 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 or the tamas tendency, I'm too scared to speak. It's a sattvic austerity. And what I can say is, the more we practice it, just like, that if we're, if we're learning to play tennis or we're learning piano, the more, how do you hit it? How do you do the melodies, the chord, like that? The more we practice, then we get better. The more we practice riding a bike, then it becomes more natural. So yeah, it's an austerity, requires practice. And then we get more and more natural on integrating all those 5 elements, sharing our truth boldly, without compromise, and in a way that's truly intended to be beneficial and pleasing and based on absolute wisdom, and in a way that's non-offensive. Now, it's our service, it's our role. It's our role to give our 100% best effort with sincerity. That doesn't guarantee a result. It doesn't guarantee the other person won't feel offended. It doesn't guarantee the other person will receive in the spirit in which I'm intending. At the same time, by me giving my best effort, it does maximize the possibility that genuine, meaningful communication is going to happen. It does maximize the possibility that I'm living in my integrity, regardless of how someone else reacts or responds.
Thank you. I think you addressed something also very important in this regard, like just now when you spoke, like how there's no guarantee that a person. And I think often what happens, if I can also check it myself, if you see, I judge whether or not I live up to the verse by looking at, is the other person experiencing, for example, being pleased, or like feels I'm benefited, or feels I'm not agitated, or feels I'm receiving the truth. And it's like kind of, the idea probably is like judging by the fruit in terms of the interaction, whether I have lived up to the verse. But as you speak now, it could also be I lived up to the verse, but maybe the person I spoke to was not, out of some reason, maybe capable to receive it the way it was intended, perhaps. So there should not be the measurement whether the other person is, not that it should not be at all, but not the ultimate. Is that correct?
Yeah, I appreciate what you share, Keshava. And I'm going to say both are valid in the sense of, sure, I want to see how someone else is responding as a sort of feedback, right? The universe is always giving us feedback. And there's a difference between feedback and interpretation of feedback. So it's feedback, and now how do I interpret that feedback? Now sometimes how I process that feedback, if the person's not pleased or they feel insulted, sometimes, okay, I can see I was telling myself I'm more humble and clean-hearted than I was, but actually I do have some resentment, and it came out in my tone of voice. I can see how I can improve there, maybe. Sometimes, okay, however the person's reacting or responding, it's feedback, and I can process it like, well, in this case, I truly, sincerely sense I did my best to communicate powerfully and cleanly, and I think he has some stuff going on, and it's not my stuff. It's not my stuff. So yeah, I would say how someone's responding or reacting, it's always feedback, and then we're responsible how we process that feedback.
Thank you. At that point of the session, I would like to open up for those who are our guests now on Zoom. If you have questions to David or Dhira Govinda Prabhu, please feel free to unmute yourself, also go on camera if you like, or those who are on Facebook. I will check whether there is something in the comments. I did not see anything. So maybe those on Zoom, if there are any questions. Yes, Dee, please. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Sorry, I was a little late joining the session, so I probably missed the first sort of 5 minutes. I know when you mentioned, you need to communicate things, part of austerity is around communicating something boldly, but sincerely. But how do you do that when the person, I know you also said you need to take responsibility over how other people receive the feedback, but how do you kind of get this kind of attitude when you're most of the time dealing with really challenging people? You might say anything, again, it's the way you perceive it, but then how do you then motivate yourself to keep communicating the truth when you're always sort of being put down or dismissed? How do you kind of encourage oneself to keep doing your bit of communication properly?
Thank you, Dee. I appreciate your sharing and your question. Thank you. Yeah. Well, one principle that I find helpful is that this assertive communication, sattvic communication, it's not intrinsically a skill. It's a principle, and that it's a principle. It's a way of being. It's a way of being, and so really it has nothing to do with the other person. It's like it's about me living in integrity. So let's say if I'm primarily in tamasic mode, I mean, like I'm too scared to speak my truth because, oh, people won't like me. Oh, people won't approve of me. People will get angry with me. So I'm going through life too scared to rock the boat. So then surely I'm not fulfilling my God-given destiny. I'm not living my highest purpose because I'm living my life driven by fear, not by inspiration and purpose. Then on the other side, let's say I go through life or some relationships very aggressively. Anything happens, I quickly become angry. lose my temper, I'm in their face, maybe I'm speaking my truth, but in a way that's hurtful and damaging, well, that's not very life enriching either. It's not my integrity. I'm polluting the atmosphere with my uncontrolled anger. So that's not my integrity either. Whereas if I respond, particularly in emotionally charged situations, maybe when people are challenging or whatever, if I respond in a way where I'm experiencing my experience, I'm clear on my truth, and I communicate my experience effectively, powerfully, so you understand me, and in a way where I know I'm not trying to hurt or belittle, I'm not trying to damage, in a way I'm truly intending to be relationship enriching, life enhancing for you and me and everyone involved, then that's my integrity. That's my integrity. And you can respond with deep appreciation and honest communication. You can respond by hating me or yelling at me. Okay, whatever. I'm living in my integrity. And however you respond, I'm 100% responsible to continue to respond in my integrity. Bold, courageous, and simultaneously considerate and sensitive, intending to be life enriching for everyone. So in a sense, it's not about the other person. It's about me living in integrity as a spiritual being in a human experience in service to the Supreme. And yes, like it's part of like, I see it's part of like a life purpose that's connected with integrity. Cultivate the capacity to experience my experience what's happening for me, and communicate it effectively in a way that's truly intended to be relationship enriching for everyone. Now, on that foundation, in that context, let's call it in the meta view, sure, I can look at, well, if I again and again have people who are emotionally violent and violating my boundaries and being uncivil and like that, of course, I can look at in the meta view, what is it about me? What is it about me that I'm continually attracting those sorts of life alienating, emotionally violent relationships? I mean, that gets into another discussion. What is it about me that I keep attracting that? Thank you, Dee. I appreciate your question.
Okay, we would have time for one more question.
Hare Krishna, Keshav Madhava Prabhu. I'm driving, so I'm off camera and there might be some noise, but may I ask a question anyway?
Sure.
Yes, I'm sorry I joined late. I was teaching yoga until after 7, but I did catch the last part. It was very interesting. So a question that I have is, how do we change our communication with family members? Because I find that often, like, I've realized certain things I've learned as a child is not beneficial, for communication. And then I've worked on changing that. And outside of my family, I find it, easier to practice it. But inside my family, I find that my family members just often, trigger me to fall back into old patterns, which is not constructive. So how do we deal with that? If our family members haven't changed, they behaving in the same way, how do we stop ourselves from also basically, and then like degrading into like lower forms of communication?
Thank you, Sharadia Ross. I appreciate your question. Yes, and I hear you're asking, like, with family members, like maybe from our perception, they're being reactive, lower mode communication, or communication blocks, non-communication, how to not, how to not get dragged into that. So I appreciate your question. I relate to it. These principles of sattvic communication they're especially important in the relations that are closest to us. And they're especially most difficult and most challenging to apply in those relationships that are closest to us. It's one thing if it's someone who we're not that close to, and then we could be sattvic and like that. So it's most important and most challenging, and that's true for me too, definitely, because the relations that are most dear and close to us, they're usually also the ones that are most emotionally charged, where we and others are prone to get most triggered. Yeah, so thanks for your question. I'm reminded there's the quote from the Christian philosopher Paul Tillich. Paul Tillich said, "The first duty of love is to listen." So I can find that because like maybe a family member does, then I want to tell them that, or argue with them, or defend myself, or make them wrong, make myself right, and or just hide away in depression or whatever. So to do the austerity, because we talked about austerity in speech, there's also austerity in listening. Meaning like, I got my judgments about what you said. I got my agreement. I got my disagreement. I got my arguments. I got that. Okay. To notice that, not pretend it's not there, and to notice that and suspend all that and do my best to show that I've understood what you've said and the feeling behind it. And understanding doesn't mean agree. I can show that I understand what you said and the feeling behind it. It doesn't mean I agree with what you said. Sometimes understanding is compared to life air. Just like if I get the wind knocked out of me and I'm gasping for breath, you could offer me a pile of money. It won't matter. You could offer me my favorite meal for dinner. Won't matter. All I want is air. So similarly, especially in emotionally charged situations, especially in family relations, sometimes emotional charge around resentment, hurt, bitterness, fear, anger, anxiety, grief, disagreement, emotionally charged situations, sometimes we can even give the best advice, or we can even praise someone. It won't matter. All we want is to be understood. All we want is to be understood. And so it is said, people don't care what you know till they know that you care. Oftentimes, a great way to show that we care is before sharing what we think we know, to show understanding and to confirm. Like I might ask something like, how are you feeling understood by me? And I'm not going to say what I want to say till I get confirmation that the other person feels 100% understood. In some circles, a conversation is defined as a vocal competition where who's ever catching their breath is called the listener. Okay, so we're talking here about a different culture, a culture of true dialogue. True dialogue means I will not say what I want to say till you've confirmed you feel 100% understood. And then I'll share what I want to share with the hope that you'll dedicate yourself to understanding what I want to say. And so we can take a stand to create a culture of true dialogue rather than a culture of simultaneous monologues. And my experience is, to the extent when I'm successful in that, then that's very powerful to transform the quality of relationships in family and in any circle. Thank you, Sharidia Ross.
All right. Thank you very much, dear Govinda Prabhu, for these very powerful responses and to the responses from the previous questions. Would you like conclusively to the end of the session share like a last few thoughts or statements that you feel should be added, or what is on your mind still?
Oh, well, I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the intelligence and sincerity and devotion of the association. Thanks for inviting me, Kesava Madhava. Yeah, so, okay, closing statement. Yeah, so I guess my encouragement, my inspiration is, yeah, let us deepen our dedication, that our communication, both the listening part and the sharing part, our communication is truly dedicated to distinguish reality from illusion for the purpose of self-realization and God realization.
Thank you very much. Okay, maybe Shardia, if you want to make the last comment, I see your hand is raised here. You may.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I just wanted to ask a short follow-up question. So my question is that, you know, usually like in, as you like explained very well, usually in like family relationships, it's often very emotionally loaded. So when you get to that point where you realize, okay, I'm already triggered and I'm not, you know, communicating in a way that's truthful and kind and pleasing, etc. Is there like any like tool you can give us, like how to then in that moment, you know, make that shift in your consciousness? Because I'm at least at the point where I'm like, I'm aware, okay, I'm triggered, but then it's very hard for me to make a shift. You know, I usually just like don't want to communicate anymore so I don't do damage, but I would like to rather know what I can do so I can communicate better, you know, even I've realized that I'm triggered.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Walking away. I'm in agreement with that as a tool. Yeah, I'm in agreement with that as a potential tool. Yes. Okay. Personally, something that I found helpful when I see I've fallen down the slippery slope to lower modes is, you know, related to what we discussed earlier, endeavoring to take shelter of transcendental sound vibration. So that could look like walking away, and walking away through taking shelter of transcendental sound vibration. You know, having enough emotional distance to distance myself from the situation, because I say I'm just going to do more damage here. Okay, let's call it in a broader view, the slippery slope of the lower modes, precisely. So then let me take shelter in Shuddha Sattva, transcendental sound vibration. For me, I use Maha Mantra, chanting Hare Krishna. And then, okay, sure, tools, something like, okay, like let's say an exercise like at least 6 nights per week for the rest of the month of June. At the end of the day, rate yourself from 0 to 10. 0 meaning I am not at all satisfied with how I showed up in my family communication today. 10 doesn't need to mean perfect, but 10, I'm completely satisfied with how I showed up in my communication today with family. Responsive, not reactive. Okay. And my guess is, based on my work with thousands of clients, my guess is that do that at least 6 nights per week before you go to sleep. And that in itself will help you, I know it helps me, to raise awareness about what triggers me, what it feels like where I'm disturbed, but I'm not giving power to this disturbance. What it feels like when I'm disturbed and I'm indulging in the disturbance and agitation. Just to make a habit at the end of the day, take 5-10 seconds, give myself a rating. If we want to embellish that process of self-awareness, okay, accompany the rating with a few lines of journaling. Let's say I rated myself a 6. Okay, so before I go to sleep, okay, let me journal a few lines. What made it a 6 that day rather than a 0? Well, there were two times where in the past I would have got triggered, but I caught myself. And instead, I showed empathic understanding before trying to make the person wrong. That felt good. Hey, that feels good. And why is it a 6 today and not a 10? Well, there was that time with with my spouse or a teenager where I felt myself becoming reactive. I didn't walk away and I raised my voice, and my anger controlled me. I wasn't using my anger controlled me. And that really ruined about 2 hours of the day. So that's why it was not a 10. So we get in the habit, we get rating, journaling, and then we raise our awareness and we become more and more sattvic and refined in the moment to make distinctions. So I can give many possible exercises like that, but there's a few.
Thank you very much, Dhira Govinda. Yes, maybe like to round it up, since also from the time frame, I think we have reached our limit for today. Yeah, what I definitely take away from the session is, again, like really clarity on different issues of communication between the 5 items for austerity of communication. I very much appreciate it. There was a lot of value also for me. And on the transcendental sound vibration, the distinction between material and spiritual sound vibration, I really like this course, and I think this could be discussed also further. I think it's a very intriguing topic. So thank you once more to taking the time and being a part of the session and sharing yourself. Thank you so much. And yes, would invite anyone if one wants to give a very short feedback or appreciation to David or Dhira Govinda, please feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting. I really appreciate all your efforts. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Karen. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you. I found it really practical, took away loads of tips. Often you sit in these sessions, it just ends up just being a philosophical session and not having anything practical to take away. So I loved your rather practical approach, which you could even tell anybody, you don't need to know the Vedas, to follow what you just said. So really appreciate kind of translating almost into layman's terms. So thank you for
Thank you, Dee. I appreciate it. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
All right. Then have a nice evening, everyone, and Hare Krishna. Thank you.